Back on Rendezvous Africa, a recent survey by Grant Thornton in South Africa found that 81% of business crime involves internal staff. The prevalence of crime pervades all aspects of business activity and severely affects employer-employee relations. Now, much has been said about the topic, but in effect, little has been achieved in resolving these issues. It is now generally recognized that the biggest security threat to an organization its employees. Joining us to discuss these issues in the studio there is Mr. Hendrik van Rooyen, CEO of the Polygraph Institute of South Africa Integrity Assessment Center. Thank you very much for joining us here on Rendezvous Africa, sir.
Thank you.
Why was the survey conducted? What is the reasoning behind even looking at it?
Well, obviously crime in South Africa is of paramount importance. It pervades every sphere of economic life, and it costs South Africans billions of rands every year. So it is inevitable that crime would be the subject of all sorts of surveys.
And how do you run a survey like this? Do you get companies who are willing to have their employer-employee relations looked at and scrutinized, really, to look at how far things go?
Normally it would be done by questionnaires, surveys done across the South African economy, and not always companies will be asked to name themselves. But that would be Grant Thornton's way of doing things. We, from our side, are actually only users of the information that they produce in this regard.
All right, now let's look at the actual stealing of employees from their employers. Is there a reason that has been looked at as to why this usually happens?
In order to understand why people do whatever they do, one must realize that it all depends on the perception and attitude of the particular individual, or a group for that matter. If the perception lives with an individual that he or she is entitled to or can get away with unacceptable behavior, in all probability the attitude would be they will display that behavior. Now, a guy by the name of Robert Rooyen, a noted psychologist, said that if you have the expectancy to succeed, you will probably do whatever you want to do. The same applies to crime. If you have the expectancy to succeed with crime, you will probably commit crime. And in South Africa, the perception seems to be, and the expectancy, that they can get away with it.
But when you look at security, and I mean, we said here in our intro that, you know, it's the biggest security threat to an organization. You know, usually it's employees. Do you think putting in security systems is the way to go? What are we looking at here?
Obviously, you can't do without security. And but what we are saying is that you need to look at managing the behavior of the individual within the organization equally. Only relying on high-tech security like camera systems and access controls and so forth only is throwing a lot of money at a problem but not solving it entirely. You need to involve the individual as well.
But when you look at crime in terms of the workplace, a lot of people, and we tend to think that crime is what would be booked in, really, when you go to a police station, for example, to say this person has stolen, physically taken something that belongs to the employer, that would be regarded as a crime. But we've got a lot of other things that we see as constituting a crime in the workplace. Take us through some of those.
Well, obviously, physical crime, or where theft occurs, like money or so forth, that's the very obvious type of crime committed. But things that are less visible until it's unearthed, for instance, fraud committed, where systems are circumvented and money or whatever is generated by the perpetrator by using systems or abusing systems, that's probably constitute one of the biggest areas where crime is committed. Then, obviously, things like sabotage and carelessness and those kind of things that also cost businesses millions, and which in many instances are done on purpose.
But how do you uncover such? You know, it then becomes somebody's word against the other, and probably what you look at as integrity, you know, to say, well, you should not be doing this.
Yes.
How do you then look at putting that down as a crime and actually doing something about it?
Well, obviously, it needs to be investigated, and normally the company or organization would use internal investigation methods, forensic auditors, for instance, or then their own staff in investigatory positions. And then from there on, they would probably use professional investigating companies, and with supporting services like this type of services that our company renders.
Now, when you look at, for example, looking at IT security systems, and you look at emails and what is now the normal tools of work, really, and also could be used otherwise. Somebody could be coming into work and using the emails, the work emails, for their personal business.
That happens all the time.
And that happens all the time, and they're using what you would call, at least, what belongs to the company, be it a photocopy, something as petty and easy as that, but still belongs to somebody else. How do you then deal with that?
That's where the management of behavior, or managing behavior, comes in, where everybody should be made aware through an effective communications campaign that unacceptable behavior, like abusing email systems, abusing the internet, abusing simple things like stationery, it costs money, and in the end it's to the detriment of everyone in the organization. And so one should communicate this and then have some systems in place where one can actually deal with perpetrators when identified.
And this was all part of this survey that was run?
That's in all probability, yes.
All right, thank you very much for talking to us there, Mr. Hendrik van Rooyen, CEO of the Polygraph Institute of South Africa's Integrity Assessment Centre. We do thank you for your time here around Africa. All right, let's take a short break and take a look at what made headlines on this day in history. When we come back, we'll continue on Rooyen Africa.